Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new E-Girls album, E.G. Crazy. E-Girls are one of those huge high production value girl groups with members in the double digits that Japan and kind of Asia in general is somewhat known for. Now, if you follow my reviews, you might know that I'm really not a fan of these big idol groups or really idol groups in general. But I will say that out of all of these really huge idol groups, your AKB48s and such, E-Girls is probably the best one. While they do have their bad songs, most of the singles that come out of E-Girls are at least decent to pretty good. And they're probably the most consistent idol group when it comes to that. And one thing that I do really like about E-Girls is that they kind of forego the ballads that J-pop groups are sometimes known for putting all over their albums. I remember the Nogizaka 46 album I reviewed with Horror, with how many ballads were on that thing. And I also see J-pop fans complaining about ballads as well. So it's nice to see that E-Girls is kind of knows what they're there for, kind of knows their place, and is just making upbeat, summery, dancey pop music. Now, leading up to this album, I was kind of excited because I really wanted to review this thing. I've been wanting to review an E-Girls album for a while because I have a lot of positive thoughts about E-Girls and their music. So I thought it'd be a nice contrast to my other kind of big J-pop reviews that are mostly negative. And when they released the track listing, I knew I was in for a doozy. Let's just say this thing is 24 tracks across 2 discs, clocking in at about an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half in length. The 2 discs are called E.G. Pop and E.G. Cool in that order. And E.G. Pop kind of has more of the typical radio pop. And E.G. Cool seems to be more focused on club bangers and the more kind of aggressive songs and a little bit more EDM focused on that side. And since this thing's so huge and I don't really want to make this just a massive long review, I'm going to be skipping around a decent amount, at least more than I normally do. I just don't want to cover 12 tracks over the course of the review. Plus, I don't really think it's necessary, as a lot of these are kind of in the same vein. Starting off, we have the first song of the first disc, Anniversary. Anniversary was a single that's been out for a little while now, a good while now actually, and is pretty solid. It's a really upbeat, kind of summery song. The instrumental is made up of some synthesizers and some guitar, combined with a 4-on-the-floor beat in the way that will be familiar to anybody who's listened to pop music in the last 10 years. Well, the song isn't really anything special. It does have a pretty catchy, fun chorus, and serves its purpose well as a fun, summery pop song. And that's all it was really trying to be in the first place. Another song I'm a big fan of is track 8, Fascination, which has this big kind of legato synth lead and these tight rhythmic guitars that remind me a bit of an Orisama track, which might be one of the reasons I like it so much. While it's not as funky as Orisama is, it's just as catchy, and the instrumental is pretty detailed as well. The song is a really great chorus that seems somewhat climactic, but not kind of heavy or overbearing. It's still pretty lighthearted and fun. And I think this is one of the best tracks on the album. It's really solid. I like it a lot. And surprisingly, I also like the ballad White Angel, which is the first of 3 Christmas songs across these two discs. White Angel starts off like any other pop ballad, with very pretty pianos accompanied with strings. And while I can't say there's anything really special about this song in the context of like pop ballads in general, it's just done really well. It doesn't drag on too long. And it has one of the cringiest Christmas rap verses I've ever heard. And it's so fucking cringe that it wraps all the way back around. And I think it's actually awesome. I enjoy it, and I'm not sure if it's ironically at this point. But yeah, it has a nice chorus, it's very pretty, it's very relaxed, and it's one of the only two ballads across this whole album. But unfortunately, between all these highlights, there's a fair amount of filler. Some of these tracks are still pretty decent, like Saturday Night, and the second Christmas song, Merry Merry Christmas. But others I find kind of entirely lackluster and somewhat painfully generic at times. Harajuku Time Bomb is a good example of this. This track was teased at the end of the music video for their song All Day Long Lady. And I thought it seemed decent. Like it only showed a bit of the chorus, and I liked what I heard well enough, thought it could be a decent track. And while I do think the chorus on this song is decent, the rest of it is just so painfully generic and unimaginative. It has this kind of like pop rock, palm muted guitar that you've heard 100 times before, if not more. And the song just comes off as like a decently written song that is just kind of ruined by a complete lack of any artistic like imagination on the instrumental side. And I'm also not a fan of the closing track on this first disc, Love, Dream, and Happiness. This is the second and last ballad on the album, and it kicks off just like the other one with some pretty piano and strings. But the main difference is, A, the song doesn't really have any memorable melodic parts. I just don't find the chorus or the verse to be very compelling. And B, it's 6.5 minutes long and just drags on and on and on and on and on. Like, if this was a 3 or 4 minute song, I could have just shrugged it off as like, oh, that was okay. You know, it was kind of middle of the road. It was decent. But when you make it this long, it just slides further and further away from decent and into bad. I find I'm tired of this song by about 4 minutes in, and then look and see that I have 2.5 minutes left to go. And sonically, it's nothing you haven't heard if you've ever heard a pop ballad in your life. But now we can move on to disc 2, E.G. Cool, which kicks off with the song All Day Long Lady, which was a single they put out pretty recently that I actually like a lot. It's really succinctly written. It gets straight to the point. It has a solid verse and chorus. It has some really tight, kind of funky guitars and a really big synth presence on the chorus that sounds really nice. And it's songs like these that make me still pay attention to E-Girls whenever they drop a new single or something. Because while they aren't really doing anything new, they aren't really trying to either. They're doing something that's been tried and tested and works. And they're doing it to a really high degree of excellence with solid songwriting and really on-point production. And their music videos are also always colorful and fun to look at. But unfortunately, this second half of the album really dips in quality after this first track. Tracks 2 through 8 on this second disc are all bad. Yeah. Bad is the word I want to use. These songs are all fairly clubby, with a few exceptions, but my main complaint is they all just sound really old, with the exception of the song Express, Do Your Dance, which has a bit more of a fresh sound. These all sound like they come from like 10 years ago. The song Caution sounds like an old Chris Brown song or something. And a lot of these tracks have like big modulated kind of dubsteppy bass that went out of style 5 years ago. While I wasn't really expecting anything new from E-Girls on this thing, I was expecting something recent. And a lot of these songs on the second disc are like rehashes of sounds that went out of style when I was a teenager and have been pretty played out for me. The last 4 tracks on here, however, do recover and take on a fresher, more modern sound. My favorite of these is probably track 11, Bon Voyage, which has these like kind of staccato, like plucked, bubbly synthesizers that remind me a bit of an Owl City track. It mellows out a little bit from a lot of the club bangers that preceded it on this disc, and just has a really solid, catchy chorus and quality vocal performance and good production all around. And this disc and this whole album closes out with the track Go Go Let's Go, which was another fairly recent single that came out. And while I do find the verse is a little bit lackluster, the chorus is really good, and it's really kind of a showstopper and a bit of a banger as well. I like the really tight, clean guitar as well, and the trap influences that show up on here are subtle and are handled pretty well, and that's the album. Sorry if I'm not going as in-depth as I usually do on some of these tracks. I'm keeping it a little brief just because I want to cover kind of the full range of what this album has to offer, and it's just such a long, large album that I have to be a little more curt with my coverage of individual tracks. But yeah, this thing is alright overall, I'd say. There's some really good songs on here. There's some pop tracks that I really love, but there's also a fair amount of filler and some tracks that really get under my skin a bit. Especially some of those really kind of dated tracks in the second half. They really kind of turn me off. But from a kind of value proposition angle, this album is a pretty normal price for big pop albums. I think it's like $25. And it's got an hour and a half of music, and like you're bound to find something you like on here. So like from that angle, maybe it's worth checking out just because there's going to be enough songs that are decent to maybe make your money worth it, even if there is a fair amount of filler. But one complaint that I do have about this album that isn't a huge complaint, and I can't really blame them too much for it, but this album has a complete kind of lack of structure in its track listing. With the exception of kind of splitting the 2 discs off in concept and making one a bit more club focused and one a bit more radio focused, the album comes off as somewhat amorphous. It feels like you could mix up the songs in just about any order and it would be about the same. But like I said, I can't really give them too much of a hard time for that, just because a lot of these songs all kind of serve the same purpose in being kind of upbeat, fun, summery, dancey pop music. But I do think it detracts a little bit from the experience of listening to this from front to back by just not having a lot of clear direction in the album structure. But if you're looking at this from a kind of like, well, I'm just going to get a bunch of songs and, put them on my iPod and put them on shuffle, that doesn't really matter. But I'm an album reviewer and I can't help but criticize the structure of an album. Overall, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on here. There's some really good songs on here. I really love a few of these tracks, but there's a few tracks on here that I hate. And separating all these kind of notable tracks is a fair amount of filler, which I guess is to be expected on a 24-track pop album with 2 discs, but it doesn't really soften the blow. But yeah, that's me. New E-Girls album. It's called E.G. Crazy. If you liked it or didn't like it or you think I'm stupid, comments are down there. I will see you guys next week. Peace.